Good evening, everybody. Little bit of a late night stream here, but for all you night owls, this should be right up your alley. This should be the time when you're most craving somebody to burst into your little YouTube notification feed with some words of wisdom and truth and honor. I'm here to provide you with what you need in every way. So, number of things going on today. I just noticed that I left on the TV in my room here, so don't be distracted by CNN babbling in the background, where Chris Cuomo, last I saw, was getting insights and analysis on all the latest impeachment happenings from the likes of Asha Rangappa, who is a former FBI operative turned media pundit superstar, and Andrew McCabe, who is now a CNN regular, another superstar, who has been anointed by our corporate media overlords as supreme authority on all things involving Trump, impeachment, Russia, etc., despite many of Andrew's claims over the course of his involvement in one of the initial Russiagate phases collapsing spectacularly. But that doesn't matter because in this media landscape, you will be rewarded with lucrative book contracts, speaking fees, and media platforms if you can be hoisted up as some kind of foil to Trump, no matter how personally corrupt or failed you may be. So that's why you see in the background there CNN raging. Maybe I'll be taken down for a copyright violation because you can just barely make out the tiniest fragments of what's going on CNN right now. Anyway, I'll touch on impeachment a little bit later. But one of the other big news items today that many of you, I would think, probably heard about quite a while ago was Hillary is now being sued by Tulsi. A lawsuit has been filed in the Southern District of New York, that famed district that everybody kept saying was going to be the end of Trump because there was so much going on in the Southern District of New York with regard to Michael Cohen. Remember that? Oh, well, that didn't really pan out. I mean, I told you at the time that it wouldn't pan out. I told you it was much ado about zip fundamentally, but that didn't stop the endless tweets and screaming news headlines and all this other kind of fundamentally inconsequential fluff about how important the Southern District of New York was to finally end the Trump presidency, and the walls were closing in because something random was happening in the Southern District of New York involving the National Enquirer parent company. Remember that? Michael Cohen, Stormy Daniels, all this junk. Seems like a faint memory now, doesn't it? Anyway, that is the district in which Tulsi filed her lawsuit for defamation against Hillary Clinton. If you haven't read through this lawsuit, it's worth reading because there are some lines in here that are just delicious. For instance, it leads with, quote, Tulsi Gabbard is running for president of the United States, a position Clinton has long coveted but has not been able to attain. Yeah, that would be true. Hillary ran twice for that. And saying that she did not attain the position is to put it quite mildly. But there's a little bit of, you know, underhanded snark embedded in that statement. In October 2019, the suit goes on, whether out of personal animus, political enmity, or fear of real change within a political party Clinton and her allies have long dominated, Clinton lied about her perceived rival Tulsi Gabbard. She did so publicly, unambiguously, and with obvious malicious intent. Tulsi has been harmed by Clinton's lies, and American democracy has suffered as well. With this action, Tulsi seeks to hold Clinton and the political elites who enable her accountable for distorting the truth in the middle of a critical presidential election. Damn. Now, the only quibble I would have with that is I'm sure Tulsi has been harmed by this to some degree, but there's also a flip side where she's been helped by it because there's a segment of the electorate who like to see somebody finally going toe to toe with Hillary after all this time. It's long overdue. So by Hillary presenting herself as a Tulsi antagonist, that actually heightens Tulsi's profile to some extent. It actually did when this first erupted in October. Tulsi got a little bit of a spike in the polls, in part from Republicans and independents who dislike Hillary and would just gravitate toward anybody with whom Hillary's feuding. So, there's sort of a double edged sword there in a way. But part of the reason why I, when this initially happened, suggested that it would be legally actionable is because it meets a pretty standard criteria for defamation. Hillary unambiguously described Tulsi as a Russian asset who is being groomed by Russia, which essentially means you're being surreptitiously controlled or Russia is pulling your strings. And that Tulsi has no personal agency because she's being directed by the Kremlin. That's an extremely egregious charge for anybody, but especially so for somebody who's a major in the Army National Guard, deals with national security issues as a member of Congress, and who is running for president. So good on Tulsi for following through on this and at least attempting to hold Hillary accountable. Will she actually succeed? Damages from Hillary? Will Hillary be found guilty? I don't know. I think it's probably a little bit far fetched that this would actually progress to that point. But this lawsuit itself is a statement, irrespective of what the outcome of any potential, trial would be. Because it shows that at least we have one person, namely Tulsi, who is just not going to take crap from Hillary anymore. Unlike some others who have tended to be a little too conciliatory with the Hill Dog. And there's that satisfies a desire for a lot of people, including I have to say myself to some extent, within the Democratic Party and the electorate more broadly. Now, Hillary is still broadly popular in the Democratic Party, so nobody should be under any illusions about that. But still, there is a portion of the Democratic Party and of just the populace writ large who has been waiting a long time for somebody to just fight back at Hillary and not do it in the Trump style necessarily, but fight back in a way that's reasoned and warranted. And it's doubly satisfying for me because what Hillary did here is sort of play along with and amplify the same kind of neo McCarthyist smears that have been such a dominant feature of the American political scene for several years now. And I've been called a Russian asset many times, or have had people suggest that I'm controlled by the Kremlin or that I'm being paid by Putin. Most of the time, it's just random trolls. So so be it. Doesn't matter. But occasionally, you do get these insinuations from people with a fair amount of prominence, and Hillary prominent people in the country, like it or not. So her saying this has ramifications. And you know what? Hillary actually gave, sorry, Tulsi actually gave Hillary a long while to apologize for and retract this allegation, but Hillary has declined to do so. So, what other option do you have at this point but to take legal action? It's your only recourse. So, it's about time that somebody actually really took a forceful stand, not just rhetorically, but legally, against some of these smear artists, Hillary being chief among them, who have corrupted and warped and poisoned American politics for years. This is part of Russiagate. Hillary speciously, scurrilously making this allegations is a direct consequence of the hysteria that Russiagate has bred. So understand that. And understand that in retaliating, Tulsi is really the only person in the entire American political scene who is willing to do something about it. And, you know, but just being honest, I mean, it strengthens my confidence in Tulsi, I have to say. Uh, just because I can tell you from firsthand experience just how frustrating it's been to have incurred similar attacks over and over and over again. Obviously, not on the same magnitude as Hillary going on a podcast and saying such a thing about me, but in miniature and spread out over enough of a period of time that it almost becomes a fact of life. It's like in the air and in the water, it's everywhere. The impeachment thing happening now is a direct extension of Russiagate. Russiagate is all around us all the time and everywhere. Sometimes it seems to ebb in its prominence, but you could always pick out little data points that show how resident of a theme, how defining of a characteristic it currently is of U.S. political life. And thank goodness, Tulsi is using what platform she does have to take a stand against it. That is highly appreciated just to me on an individual level, but it's also good for all the others. It's good for democracy, not to be melodramatic, but it's good for the body politic that somebody is providing a counterweight to this. Now, one argument that I've seen a little bit online in reaction to this lawsuit was that, oh, Hillary never specifically named Tulsi. So what is Tulsi on about? She doesn't have any legitimate claim here because Hillary never uttered her name. Couple problems with that. Number one, anybody who listened to Hillary's words when that audio first came out in October knew without any ambiguity whatsoever that she was referring to Tulsi. If you were just moderately informed about the Democratic primary race and U.S. politics, you knew who she was talking about instantly. There was no doubt about it at all. On top of that, when Hillary Clinton's own spokesperson, Nick Merrill, was asked to confirm that she was indeed referring to Tulsi, Merrill infamously replied with a confirmatory statement in the form of this absolutely asinine Russian reference, which was if the nesting doll fits. Or, in other words, yes. Merrill went on to say in that October reply, quote, "This is not some outlandish claim. This is reality." So, why are we pretending that we don't know who was being referred to here or that there was any ambiguity about it whatsoever? And thirdly, somebody pointed this out to me just a few hours ago. In that podcast where Hillary made this, David Plouffe, Plouffe, who was Obama's campaign manager in 2008 and runs this little podcast because everybody and their grandmother has a podcast now, including myself. So, but David Plouffe, David Plouffe on that very podcast said that, you know what, I think the big news takeaway from this podcast is going to be that she accused Russian Tulsi Gabbard of being a Russian asset and being boosted by some sinister combination of Trump and Russia to run as third party and corrupt our 2020 election. David Plouffe said it. So he didn't have a difficult time apprehending what Hillary was referring to. So that's just a cop-out. Of course, it is clear beyond measure that Hillary was referring to Tulsi there. So that should be perspective. This conflict should be stricken from the record. And good old Dick Merrill weighed in again today by calling the suit ridiculous. Okay, so if it's so ridiculous, then haul your butt to the courtroom and explain why. Should be interesting. But, obviously we're in the middle of a electoral campaign. The first voting happens in less than 2 weeks. So, obviously part of the motive here is going to be political. Tulsi is aware that when the Hillary feud first broke out, she got a boost in notoriety, publicity, and even in the polls. So you can't detach that from this suit in terms of timing. But also, it's warranted on the merits. As somebody who is engaged in journalism, I am sensitive to defamation claims being weaponized speciously. But I don't view that to this incidence of it to be specious. Seems like this fits a pretty clear and direct standard for defamation. So, we'll see where this goes or if it has any kind of impact. But there was an abnormal number of journalists at Tulsi's event tonight in a tiny little town in New Hampshire called Charlestown. Don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's a tiny little place right on the Vermont border. And usually you'll have a handful of journalists at Tulsi's events, but today there was a whole gaggle of them because their editors say, "Oh, we have this semi-viral story today about Hillary suing Tulsi. So head out, haul your butt out to Charlestown and make sure you get a quote from Tulsi on the suit. Don't care about anything else that she says over the course of 90 minutes. That's insignificant. Make sure you get a crisp little 7-second clip of Tulsi talking about the Hillary suit. Now, in fairness, they knew that they were going to generate that kind of attention when they decided to file this suit today. So you can't really blame the journalist. But what I do blame the journalist for is not having any interest in her substantive views at all, for the most part, and just sort of using her as a toy to play with when they want to generate clicks as part of this, dramatic confrontation between Hillary and her. So, in the gaggle, I mean, I don't participate in the gaggles at her events. It's not necessary. So what I do is just observe them, and I'm mostly observing the journalists more so than Tulsi. I want to know because usually it's illuminating to see what the journalists prioritize in terms of the questions that they pose. And the first, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 questions probably had something to do with the Hillary spat, even though she basically said she had to say about it, and she's recommended to just go read the lawsuit for the further elaboration on her stance. No, what I thought, the way that she put it, and actually in the town hall itself tonight, some voter or a citizen asked, "Why do you think that Hillary came out and calls you a Russian agent?" That's what the voter said, agents. Hillary didn't use the word agents. She said asset, but I mean, these terms get so conflated that she might as well have said agent. And what Tulsi said was, "You'll have to ask her." And she said, "I will not stand quietly by as Hillary Clinton or anyone else tries to smear my character." Isn't it refreshing how somebody? I mean, it's refreshing for somebody finally just to be unadulterated in their refusal to take this kind of crap from Hillary and her acolytes. Probably not going to get that kind of retort from Bernie anytime soon. Just saying. So it's interesting. We shall see what happens. Tulsi also did a really good tweet today on Greenwald, which go pull up her feed if you haven't seen it. The most clear and direct, I think, statement of support for Greenwald that I've seen amongst the few politicians who have weighed in on his behalf. Okay, so a little bit on what's going on impeachment-wise. I listened to much of the melodrama today, but I don't know how any healthy person can stand to hear Adam Schiff theatrically perform the way he does at this impeachment trial for like 4+ hours, I think it was today. So I listened to probably 2 hours or so of it, and bits and pieces here and there because I was doing other things. I couldn't spend 8 hours listening with full attention. But I read some of the transcript. I noticed, I did a tweet on this a little while ago, that if you search this transcript just from today's hearing or just from today's proceedings, the words Russia or Putin were uttered 57 times, at least. And that's assuming that the transcription service on C-SPAN picked it all up. So we were told that this was all about this Ukraine phone call. And yet the recurrent themes of the whole Russiagate nonsense keep percolating back up, keep driving the actions and statements of the prime movers of Russiagate who just decided to convert into its, ugly stepsister, Ukraine Gate, when that became the proximate cause of what could enable them to seek impeachment. So they could have impeached Trump on any number of things, but they decided to impeach him on something that had a direct thematic connection with the dominant theme of Trump's presidency, even before he assumed the presidency, which was this whole notion of soliciting, welcoming foreign interference provided by Russia to help him get elected. And now they're saying that he has further solicited interference that helped Russia by temporarily withholding future dispersals of military aid, which were never actually logistically withheld, because it exposed our allies in Ukraine to Russian aggression. So Russiagate is still all around us. Turn on CNN and you're just seeing the latest episode of it. That's why Adam Schiff is running this thing. Adam Schiff was the main Russiagate guy in Congress. Do we forget? Do we think it's a coincidence that he was then chosen to be the lead impeachment manager, who is just on everybody's TV screens and internet screens and phone screens today for hours upon hours monologuing? If you really thought, if you ever bought into like the progressive, quote unquote, progressive with a little trademark logo is how I tend to put it. If you ever bought into the progressive with a capital P rationalization for this impeachment process, because Trump needs to be held accountable, and you thought that Adam Schiff was going to hold Trump accountable, man, I have a bridge to sell you somewhere out here in New Hampshire in a place where there's no river to cross, because to put stock in Adam Schiff means to completely ignore just the insanity that he's propounded day after day with regard to the most central and destructive narrative of the past several years. And I'll just never get over it. I'll never get over the abdication of critical thinking that so many in the media have gotten away with, and they're just it just continues now with their just mindless cheerleading of Adam Schiff, because they're so moved by his amazing lawyerly oratory, because they're so bowled over by his masterful ability to weave together a case that indicts Trump beyond any reasonable doubt. And who knows, maybe even a couple Republican senators who are sitting there paying very close attention in their seats during these 8-hour days. Maybe they're going to be so, so moved by Schiff's performance that they'll even go along with a couple Democratic procedural motions, and maybe we'll get a witness subpoenaed, and then they'll bring in John Bolton. Wow. John Bolton is who Democrats think is going to come in and save the day for them. Think about that for a moment. Step back. Democrats are saying, and this almost sounds like a joke. If it's almost like I wouldn't have believed this if you told me a year ago, 2 years ago. The Democrats are saying that their hopes for a successful impeachment hinge on John Bolton. They think John Bolton is the ticket. Really? Say those words to yourself over and over again, and just try to grapple with whether that makes even the remotest amount of sense. I know that Democrats have exalted all these discredited functionaries as the Trump opponent of the day, but I maybe would have not believed that they would go so far as to valorize even John Bolton. Even that, John Bolton sounds would have just been a little too far fetched. But sure enough, that's where we are. Where all they're doing now is trying to cater their arguments such that Susan Collins, Mitt Romney, and like one or two others will say, "Yeah, we're going to support whatever Chuck Schumer's procedural motion is, and we're going to bring in John Bolton to enlighten us as to the horrible things as Trump did with his phone call." Because if Trump really is guilty of massive wrongdoing, we all know that the worst of his wrongdoing is a phone call he made in July of 2019. They got him on a phone. It's worse than getting Trump. It's worse than getting Al Capone on tax evasion. It's even dumber. At least, like Al Capone, kind of, Trump deserves a lot of things, but to be impeached over a triviality, it doesn't even accomplish the goal of what they say that they want to do, which is to hold him accountable. See, I can do Batman. I'm gonna do Adam Schiff as Batman. We're gonna hold Trump accountable by impeaching him on a phone call. I mean, it's just so. It's easy to lose sight of the stupidity of it. Um, and it's easy to lose sight also of the danger of it. Should I do the rest of the stream in the Batman voice? The Batman voice is like it's a combination of the Batman voice and also the Don LaFontaine voice, who's like the dramatic movie preview guy. In a world where somebody does something, John Bolton will come in and save the day. This summer, John Bolton is the impeachment superstar. Rated R. Anyway, it's a pretty good Batman, people say. Okay. I can actually do some. You'd be surprised. I can do some decent impressions. I just don't show off my skills on these streams. Um, somebody says the Batman is good. Somebody says it needs work. Okay, I'll improve my Batman skills. I'll devote my energy to that instead of watching the stupid impeachment crap. Um, it's also tangent, right? It's also easy to lose sight of how dangerous some of the rhetoric being spouted here is. I don't know if you saw one of the quotes that was circulated from an opening part of Schiff's monologue, where he repeats the line that was said in one of the impeachment proceedings in the fall, which is that we send this lethal aid to Russia because Ukraine has to fight Russia over there, so we don't have to fight them here. Now, think about that for a moment. That's the same rhetoric that George W. Bush used to justify the onset of the global war on terror, where he's saying if we don't fight the terrorists over there, we're going to have to fight them here. So, is the idea that Russia is planning to invade the United States and to keep them at bay to prevent an invasion of Florida or something? We're going to have to, in perpetuity, basically fund and fuel a proxy war in Ukraine? Why are you whipping up a totally non-existent threat of Russia invading the U.S.? Because that's the only logical inference you can make by this rhetoric. Really fight Russia over there so we don't have to fight them here? I think they're jonesing for a fight. Adam Schiff would love it if we were in a state of war, because then that would make the treason accusation all that much more actionable. Then he could just outright accuse Trump of treason for aiding and abetting Russia rather than insinuating it or beating around the bush on it or just hiding treason accusations in their stupid supplementary materials in the Judiciary Committee report, which of course I had to read. So so I guess the impeachment schedule is so let me take a look at some super chats actually. Jeffrey says, "Thank you again for your excellent analysis. Much appreciated. Thank you. And thank you for the super chat. Very kind." Nick says, "Bolton is a disgrace to mustaches everywhere. As goes the toothbrush, so goes the groomed walrus." I'm just gonna let that one speak for itself. I never had a mustache. I was always creeped out by the concept of having a mustache, and also I would never do anything that required me to engage in daily facial grooming. So that's the rhetoric. That's the logic behind the beard, fundamentally. David says Schiff sounded like Reagan. Reagan, I think, would probably come across as rational compared to Schiff and his current compatriots, because at least Reagan had like a positive working relationship with Gorbachev, right? Whereas having a positive working relationship with Putin now is seen as evidence of Trump's treason as a result of the kind of paranoia that's been popularized by the likes of Schiff. No, I'm not trying to glorify or whitewash Reagan. Just saying, I think the Democrats, as embodied by Schiff, have gotten so bad that they might make Reagan look relatively sane. Krillin says, "Did you ever see Spies Like Us with Chase Aykroyd?" No, I just Googled it. And it's a 19. Excuse me. The yawn means it's almost time to retire for the evening. Sadly, Spies Like Us is a 1985 American comedy film directed by John Landis. Okay, I know him. I'm not that into comedy films, frankly, but maybe if this one's good, I'll watch it. Music by Paul McCartney. All right, I guess I better watch it then. I didn't. I mean, I feel like I know almost the entirety of Paul McCartney's discography, and I can't say that I recalled him doing the title song be the movie Spies Like Us from 1985. It was McCartney's last top 10 hit in the US until 2015. Huh. Okay, I gotta brush up on my McCartney history, evidently. What else? Yeah, the early primary polls are kind of all over the place. There's some positive news for Bernie. There's some positive news for Biden. It's hard to draw any firm conclusions based on the data that's come out recently. I think the way to look at it is that a lot of people are undecided, and the final week, or even the final couple days, even the final day or hours leading up to the Iowa caucus are going to be crucial. I, for example, met a guy today at Tulsi's event who said to me he's undecided, and he's deciding between Biden, Bernie, and Tulsi. So if there doesn't seem any rhyme or reason behind that, it's because you got to recognize that most people don't think about American politics in the way that you do if you're somebody who's constantly fighting about it every single day online. They just have these sort of impressionistic takes on the candidates that are vague, that aren't hugely ideological for the most part. And, they can rationalize themselves into just deciding somewhat randomly between like a Bernie and a Biden and a Tulsi. I mean, it's very, it's almost instinctual. But when you talk to enough voters, you are just never surprised anymore at how, again, seemingly random their candidate preferences are. Like, um, I met somebody who was deciding between Mayor Pete and Tulsi. It's just like, whoa. I don't know that there's a single person on Twitter, for instance, who likes both Mayor Pete and Tulsi. Just most normies do just not live in our world, and that's why I always try to kind of check my confirmation bias, which, because of my information consumption habits, is going to be informed to a large extent, and probably to an unhealthy extent, by online debates. So through social media, whether it be Twitter, YouTube, or whatever. Um, so maintaining impartiality or maintaining humility means at least striving to get out of your own head and realize that the vast universe of voters out there in the country are just operating from a radically different set of presumptions and information intake systems than you are. So I accepted that long ago, and I try to adjust my analytical framework accordingly. Um, okay. I'm going to sign off now. I'm going to spend the rest of the night working on my Batman. I'm going to cover the arrest of the impeachment fiasco in a Batman voice. Because why not? Why not? All right, everybody. Somebody asked, did you see Tucker Carlson defending Glenn Greenwald on his show tonight? Yes, I did. And I retweeted the clip that his account put out. Sarah says, MT, you have been in good spirits lately. I'm grateful for the laughs and insights. Good combo for amping up your YouTube channel. Well, thank you. I like to think that I can make people chuckle. Amy asks, does Angela Nagel have any new descriptors for voting blocks like South Park conservatives? I talked to her. I talked to her not too recently, but within the past few months about one new such voting block, and I wonder if she came up with a name for it. I'll ask her and get back to you. Okay. Good night, everybody. Sweet dreams. We'll do it all again tomorrow. Close YouTube. Go to sleep. Stop watching videos on a loop. You are a slave to your recommended video feed. That's what Google wants. Okay, enough. Bye.